I'm throwing scissors.
Doesn't matter. If somebody could keep track at home, I'd really appreciate it.
I mean, it's just every time I lose.
Every time. Welcome to Books You've Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Nicole, and this is episode 20 of Books We Never Read, where we talk about chapters 11 through the end of Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman. So before we get started, make sure this is the episode you really want to watch, or what you really want to be watching. We talk about the books as if you've read along with us so far. So if you still need to get caught up, check out the playlist where we have all the episodes for Anansi Boys. And if Anansi Boys isn't your thing, check out our other playlists with all the other books that we've read. We've had sci-fi, we've had mystery, we've had historical fiction, which I still am recovering from.
Yeah, it was a good one.
And please, give us your comments in the box below. And always, you can join us for our live premieres, which these episodes are live premieres, every Sunday at 10 a.m. Central, and we're in the little chat box chatting with you. We don't get a chance to talk about everything that happens in the books. Sometimes we just get tied up or wrapped up on one thing, and we miss really great things that we'd love to talk about. So having your input makes us get so much more out of these books.
Yeah. We're still talking to people about the first books we ever read.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun because those are great books.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just getting so much more out of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
So join us. And if you have any book recommendations, give us those in the comment box below as well.
Yep.
All right.
We get started?
Yeah.
Cool.
This book was so good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not shocked, right? I've always liked Neil Gaiman's work. This is maybe not my favorite thing he's ever written. I think American Gods still takes that piece for me, but it's a very close second, and it definitely goes above and beyond Ocean at the End of the Lane for me. And I think it's just the characters. There were so many characters that just had such great. They just had such great magnetism, I suppose. Yeah. Ocean at the End of the Lane had a small cast, and this had a much larger one, and I really enjoyed it.
And vaster setting, I guess.
Yeah.
I liked this better than American Gods.
Okay.
And I don't know why I was disappointed in American Gods, and it might mean that I need to reread it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I just wasn't in an American Gods place. But I loved how thick the mythology was in this. And I think the difference between this and American Gods is this was focused on Anansi. Mm-hmm. It was focused on this one realm of mythology, whereas American Gods was spread real thin with lots of different mythologies.
Well, it's almost like we're reading an Anansi story, right? It's the Anansi story of the time Anansi died and his sons had to fight tigers, right? That's what this is. And it fits in so well. As a book, as a story, it fits in so well with the stories that it's trying to replicate, I think, and that was a lot of fun. And
that is something he's so skilled at, Neil Gaiman. Mm-hmm. I mean, he can have books that are just books on their own and not inspired by not inspired by anything else that we know, by current or existing mythology. But then he can create something that fits in so well and contains a lot of the really important things that make mythology.
Right.
And I love that.
Yeah. Almost all the guesses we made were wrong.
Except that.
Well, no, but it doesn't matter, right? A lot of the guesses I made. Let's
like what?
Just you all I was thinking maybe Anansi organized all this and done all this, all these things that didn't happen, but I think it's because of the show Lost. Ever since Lost came out, we feel like we have to solve the mystery, and we don't. But there were so many threads here between Rosie and her mother, and Daisy, and Graham Coates, and whatever's going on with Spider, and Anansi, and all these, and Maeve, and there was and the women in Florida, and there were so many threads I could not figure out how they were all going to tie together. Mm-hmm. But it came into such a perfect package there at the end, and that's masterful story. Nobody was extra, right? You could have probably done without Maeve and the story would be fine, but it was excellent.
It was a wonderful addition. You were right about Maeve and Mr. Nancy. Now they're on the same plane.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So he's going to be able to help her.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
He danced her way to Graham Coates.
Yeah.
And so that was really great. And then I had made this guess that somehow Graham Coates is the real life tiger of the story, and he did kind of become the tiger,
right?
And now he's eternally tortured by Tiger.
Well, yeah, that was good.
Fitting ending for him. And what you said about how there were all these characters across the world, you know, and they were intertwined so interestingly. We physically saw Charlie put it together in the web in the song that he sang towards the end where he was rebuilding the world back.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool.
That was probably one of my favorite scenes. I like mythology that has like song. All the magic for Anansi is basically like song and dance, and I think that's what's really, and speaking or music has like a very magical thing. Like a lot of mythology has that as magic.
Because most were sung. You know, the stories were sung through oral tradition.
It's also the oldest form of art, right?
Yeah.
Like before we could even speak, we were singing, you know, and before we could paint, we were dancing, you know, using what you have as a tool is the oldest thing we've got. And I really enjoyed that thing. And I like when magic is explained to me. Like I want to know how it works, but there are some magic systems that nobody knows. Like even it bothers me when Harry Potter knows how he's casting a spell and I don't understand how they discovered it in the first place, right? Like how do you know what's going on, but I don't know what's going on. But when everybody's just like, I don't know, you just do it. Or so one of the best scenes, or one of my favorite magics was when he and Spider go to the place at the beginning of the world, and they walk out of the hotel and they turn in a direction that isn't normally there.
Yeah,
perfect. I loved that. And it had a very the first books we read. Why can I never do
Three body problem?
Yeah, it had a very three body problem feel to it.
There was even a question about like, am I in a pocket dimension?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Charlie had even said, like, you know, for us to go to the beginning of the world, we don't have to have the black candles and we don't have to have the right herbs. Right. We just have to have the right feel. Right.
And I have an appreciation for that kind of magic. It's just something intuitive, and it's done out of confidence instead of out of like ritual or whatever. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. That part that you said you liked where he's singing the song and rebuilding the world and giving everyone the appropriate ends and the appropriate justice, and the way that whole part was written was very traditional mythology. It was very the Odyssey, and it was very Gilgamesh, and it just had that component where you can tell, and even though this was not a story told down through the eons orally, it had that feel of oral tradition, of it being having a rhythm to the words.
Yeah. Were you surprised? I really thought that during that scene, he and Spider would become one again, and they didn't.
They did not.
Were you shocked by that? I was kind of surprised.
I did think at some point, like earlier, like once we knew for sure that yes, they were one person split, I thought that they'd get back together into one. But then at some point I stopped thinking that, and I didn't even think about it again until this very moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would have been tragic because Rosie or Daisy would have had to lose their man or whatever, but they were all pretty terrible with each other anyway, so like it wouldn't have bothered me a whole lot. But I really thought that somehow he would like stitch himself back together in that song, and we would see Spider go away. But I guess like at the end of it, it's not important that happens.
Yeah.
You know. So.
Yeah. That was so good. Since we're talking about mythology, I just have a couple of other notes. After he sings the song that recreates the world and puts things back the way they should be, Charlie realizes that he wants to sing forever now. And he just wants to sing things that make people happy in the moment.
Yep.
And I thought that was really, really beautiful and cool. And it also reminded me of Gilgamesh. So Gilgamesh was, you know, this demigod, whatever, on the search for immortality. His best friend had died, and he wants to bring him back, and he's also scared of his own death. And he comes across a tavern keeper named Shaduri, and Shaduri teaches him basically, she's the god of wine, but teaches him that, like, no man has ever not died.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and get that through your head now and spend your life enjoying all the indulgences that you can, with your friends and your family and your lovers and food, and just dance and sing and have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can die happy,
Mm-hmm.
It just kept reminding me of that, just in the way that it's told, the fact that it's all very sing-song, and then also that Charlie has found his happy. He was such a mundane,
yeah,
vanilla guy
mm-hmm.
before, and now he's found the spark
Mm-hmm.
that can bring joy into his world.
Yeah, well, and he was in like a soul-sucking job before, and there's something about like being in that like rat race, spinning the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
where all you can think about is like, well, I have to keep this wheel spinning, and you don't think, well, I could just hop off.
Right.
Until something happens that breaks the wheel.
Yeah.
And I guess I have like that in my own life, like professionally, pre-COVID, I think I was in the wheel, and I was just going, going, going. And when everything just stopped, just came slamming to a halt, for like 2 years. For like 2 years, I just like hung out. I went to work every day, and just like I couldn't do most of the things I needed to do. And it really changed sort of the way I think about things and I operate. And but sometimes and it's tragic that it takes something, that it takes Tiger trying to kill your family, or a disease, or whatever it is, to shake you out of that wheel. But couldn't it just be like reading something like this, where you're like, what, I don't want to do this anymore. And I would hope that this would be that thing for people, like it just could, if you just decided, like maybe we should quit our jobs and just do book club full time.
No. But so we have elements of mythology, and then we have elements of Neil Gaiman.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties in. I'm not changing the subject. The lessons learned. Neil Gaiman focuses a lot in his stories on that whole, you can go anywhere, but there you also are.
Mm-hmm.
You can't escape yourself.
Right.
You have to deal with who you are and come to terms with that.
Mm-hmm.
But he also added a little twist in here that is also very true, and that's, you can change yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can, to an extent, you can change your personality, you can change your perceptions, the way that you interact with the world around you. You have to work at it. It doesn't come as easily as like, I had a brother, he was me, I'm also magic. It's not that easy, but the lesson is there, that you can do that. And so I really like that addition. A lot, like I said, a lot of Neil Gaiman's is no matter where you go, you're going to find yourself. So don't try to run away from yourself.
Right.
There you also are. So I like this. I like that Charlie changed throughout the book. That he put that hat on and realized,
I can be confident.
This is me.
Yeah.
And it's also coming to terms with his father. He couldn't see the mermaids and he couldn't see the magic because he was irritated with his dad. And he was fighting that part of him. He didn't want to see the parts of himself that looked like his dad. But once he came to terms with that, suddenly a whole world was opened up. And now he's taken his son to see the mermaids. And, he knows he can sing a song and make magic happen.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool, too. And in the real world, that's also something we have to come to terms with. We have to understand where we're from and who we are, and how all of this builds ourselves. And the more you fight it, the worse you're going to be.
Yeah. Well, you can, you could wish your house is made of bricks, but if all you got is wood, you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
So make the best wooden house you got, or
yeah.
whatever. So. Oh yeah, I'm glad the mermaid came full circle. That was cool.
Yeah, because we've been waiting to find out what's up with the mermaids.
What's up with the mermaids?
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. I had just written a little thing about the lime. This section of the reading started with him getting a lime, and I was like, "What's the point of this lime? And is it ever going to be important?"
Yeah. Well, it's the perfect like Chekhov's gun, right? Like
yeah,
we introduced this lime, and then it was important. But the lime was one of my favorite characters as an inanimate object. It was one of my favorite characters, and it was just really well done.
But it also showed, how quickly information travels in this tiny place.
Right.
And it was also very epic.
Yeah.
You have an item. It's this item, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was very funny. But did you bring the lime? Oh, don't have the lime. What are you talking
I kept expecting that he wasn't going to be able to like break through to the next thing or find what he was doing unless he had the line.
I know. I was like,
I was
keep
like, just
the
go
line
get
with
it.
you. But it didn't matter. Yeah. It didn't matter. Talking again about, like coming to terms with things, and now because he has come to terms with his father, he can see the mermaid and stuff like that. The first time you went to the beginning of the world, the animals were more human.
Right.
And the second time he went to the beginning of the world, they were much more beastly because his perspective had shifted. And so there is a lot there to, our expectations shape how we see the world. And so sometimes you have to remember to shift that expectation and that perspective so you can see things for what they really are and get the most out of it. I liked that.
I really enjoyed the scene of Graham Coates also being the Shadow Tiger thing. Like that was just so well done. And if I don't know if they were ever to make a movie, how you would do that scene well. But when it's in writing, you can just say it, and it's and somehow you're like, okay, it is both things.
That issue is very similar to what we were talking about last night. We had watched 1920.
We finished 1922,
and we were like, how are Stephen King's books so good and the movie version so disappointing?
Yeah.
And it's because of that. There are so many things that our minds can reconcile imagination-wise when we're reading, that when they're put to the screen, it just loses its magic. But I kind of saw this whole Graham Coates Tiger thing almost the way they had done like Voldemort in the movies towards the end, where Harry's like ripping himself out of Voldemort. Like there's like the head split thing. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I saw. I guess like in my head, it was Graham Coates, but with the shadow of a tiger.
Yeah.
Except that Graham Coates was the shadow of the Shadow Tiger. Like if that makes sense. That's kind of how I saw it, right? Where the shadow thing was the real thing and Graham Coates was the shadow.
The other way I kind of saw it was like a little holographic picture. Or when you look at it one way, it's one, and look at it the other, it's the other. Yeah. So it goes back and forth.
Well, and then also, like, it was dark and everything, and so you could have, like, and maybe the way you shoot it is, you have, like, a clock mount in a hand, or like you see little bits and pieces in the dark, but you never have to see the whole thing.
Yeah. I loved that Rosie's mom was like, I'll flash him.
Yeah! That was good.
That was so funny. I also loved that by the end she didn't change. She was still just a bitter, wretched little woman, because some people don't change. Graham Coates didn't change.
No.
Yep.
And
I also loved when Rosie became like super determined, like I'm not afraid of the situation anymore. He's going to kill us either way. So let's just make a plan and get out of here. She had, this like voice of steel. And that's where her mother had gotten it from. You can see where her mother had gotten it from. That concept that, like, the mothers do learn from their children. You think it's the other way around, but really you do learn from the young ones around you. Again, seeing something perhaps in yourself that you couldn't see, but you can see it in someone else and realize that you've got it too.
Yeah. I enjoyed the part, like, all up in there where Graham Coates had to invite Tiger in, like, to become possessed, basically. Ultimately it's boiled down to, like, a possession at the end. And you don't often view possessions in literature or movies from, like, a non-Christian point of view, I suppose. Like, this was very interesting to me because it wasn't, like, it was still, like, the classic possession. Like, you've invited this demon thing into you. But there was no, like, crosses in Latin and holy water. And, like, there was just none of that. And you had to do battle with this thing through your own magic, right? And so, like, it was still religious necessarily, but
in mythology we do see it in a non-religious way. You would see, like, there was a whole battle in the Iliad.
I'm talking about, like, right now, modern literature. Possession is always there was no Catholicism in the Iliad, right? So it can't have been
right. Well, but that's just, I'm saying, like, it. That's why he did it this way, is because that's how it has been done. Yeah. The gods come into a person and start this little war and then dip out.
I think it's unfortunate that we have generally lost that. And that it's always viewed through this one lens, because this lens is cool. And I would like to see more, like, voodoo possessions or whatever, right? Like, but then without the, the
that's the same.
Western religion. It worked the same way.
Yeah.
but it had to be resolved differently, I guess, and that was cool.
Yeah. It was fun. Anything's tickled you?
Anything tickled me?
Anything making you laugh?
There were several things that made me laugh, I guess. Just like Maeve Livingstone in general, just beating him up and being upset by it. Definitely the mom flashing, I thought was funny. The entire scene where Charlie proposes, using the line and singing, and like how they manipulated that whole situation to get themselves out of being held hostage, basically.
So. Again, a Anansi story. Very much so.
Also, like, not a major plot point, but how the cops were all like, "No, this guy's up and up, and he bought us a new police station, all that." And at the end, they said, like, "We always suspected he was a bad man."
It's always the foreigners.
Okay.
Yeah. And good job on Daisy. Following her hunch. She's got her little song. I also thought it was funny. So at the end, when Spider creates, a place for Rosie to work, for her to just do good.
Yeah.
And that's what I kept saying at the beginning. Like, she's just good.
Yeah.
And that.
Well,
Neil Gaiman kind of nurtured that too. Like, that is her personality. She just does good.
So she wanted him to get like a day job. So he basically sets up a day job that will run itself.
Yeah.
So he can just like be like, I'm going to work, and then go
piddle.
Eat everywhere. Yeah. I thought it was pretty funny.
Very funny, very Anansi story,
And it tickled me at the end when they buried the woman next to.
Oh, and he's like, Anansi. Can you be quiet, please? We're trying to rest down here.
That part was pretty funny too. And I just love how he's like, I'll just sleep for another 20, 25 years and then show up. And the way he says that he's waiting for his grandchildren. It's always fun to see the grandchildren.
Yeah.
So he's clearly done this before and had previous kids. And of course he had, right? He's older than anything.
Yeah, so. Eternal.
Yeah. But I really enjoyed that sort of the cyclical nature of what it's like to be a god and not just this eternal stationary thing.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes back to your hunch, that maybe Anansi was over all of this to bring them together. He wasn't like the puppeteer controlling, but he was the fly on the wall, giving his little wink, like, keep on, you're figuring it out,
right.
He knows it's going to work out in his favor.
Mm-hmm.
He's confident in that and just lets them go about doing it and just watches and enjoys.
Yeah.
It's an interesting view of a deity.
Yeah.
Not the puppet master, but just
here to help,
letting it unfold and tossing a hat at you when you need it.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, that's probably a more ancient view of deities, right? They're like, I guess Zeus was like kind of a puppet master. There were several Greek gods who were a bit of a puppet master on the regular.
They could manipulate, they could trick.
But then most of them would just show up and be like, here, you need a spear now, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's very cool.
They could enhance, but things were still kind of out of their control. The gods would beg to differ with that.
Fair enough. But whatever.
But yeah, overall, I mean, I enjoyed it just for the story that it was. I enjoyed it for, the references, the style of it, how it mimicked mythology and epics in general. It felt so good to read that and to be modern, but also have these very strong ties to just the way things should be done in literature.
So all of the Anansi stories did tie back into the way the story was, right? So Anansi hiding in the grave so he can come out and eat. Like, Anansi was again in a grave, but he was just like taking a nap or whatever, and everybody thought he was dead. And the story of Anansi and Tiger with the mother-in-law, I mean, it kind of comes back full circle, right? But they're both killing the same mother-in-law,
right?
Or they're killing one and bringing her back, right?
Yeah.
But that kind of tied back in again, and so that was cool. How those stories sort of had a shadow that were in the main story.
And depending on if you had the UK publication of the book or another publication of the book, the UK version had a deleted scene, if you will. It had an extra story of Spider at the end of it. The editor had asked Neil Gaiman if he'd be willing to at least like put a piece he cut out back in at the end.
Hmm.
And it was when Spider was trapped
Mm-hmm.
and chained and got his tongue cut out. Like it ended with his tongue being ripped out.
Mm-hmm.
But it was his shenanigans along that way trying to trick his way out of the situation, and he would get so far and then kind of get like reeled back in and get so far and get reeled back in. But it was a lot of the way that it ended up being in its final form, that chapter, Spider kind of just succumbed to being stuck there and waited to kind of be rescued. But with that piece in, you do see much more of when Rosie was like, I felt like you were helping me even though you weren't there. Do you remember that? You kind of see more of that there. He was also thinking of her, and she had a heavy sigh somewhere in the world, and they were much more connected through that.
That was interesting, like sort of like a thin veil between worlds where there was battle going on. And again, that's like a very common, like in spiritual horror books or whatever, right? Like there's demons and angels here, and then the humans are here, but it's all in the same place, just like a different plane, I suppose. And like how close these things really are, right? Like the gods aren't ever very far away,
right?
They're right here.
Yeah,
you just can't quite get to them.
I also thought it was it was just thrown in there real quick, but Tiger will be trapped in the cave until the Anansi Boys forget he's there. That's the magic that'll release him from his cave.
Yeah. I wasn't sure about the Weasley thing. I was like, this is weird, what's going on? And then it said absentively, and I was like, oh, okay.
Maybe because I was doing the audiobook, but I knew immediately that was Graham Coates. His little voice was the same. Oh, man. What a little turd. I saw him very much as Peter Pettigrew, especially once he became the little Weasley thing from Harry Potter. Sorry.
I'm not sure exactly who that person is. Is he the rat person?
He's Ron's rat.
I didn't quite see him that way. He was like a little more proper. But, he was a good villain.
He was.
He really was.
So. He was bad. He enjoyed being bad. He got a lot of what he wanted because he was bad.
Yeah.
You know.
But yeah, I think that's about it. I would enjoy dipping back in on something else Neil Gaiman in the future. I don't know what else there is that we haven't read, but that'd be fun.
Yeah. I do want to read the Sandman series.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fun. That's another one of those things where like the magic just kind of works because you just sort of believe it. Situations.
Yeah. We tried reading Good Omens, and it was almost word for word the show, and so we kind of lost steam on it.
Yeah,
not because it wasn't good, but because we had just finished the show, so it just felt like we were rehashing. Right. But I would be interested in
that'd be cool
in reading Good Omens because that show is really good.
Yeah, so that's on.
I don't remember.
I think that was on Amazon.
Yeah.
I think it was on Amazon. So that's a Neil Gaiman with Terry Pratchett, I think. Yeah, and so that's an excellent series. They have great actors who do it.
I think another season is
maybe so. I feel like the main story got wrapped up, but I really don't remember. But that one's great. And then of course American Gods, which is a book, and that one's on HBO.
And that also might have been part of what messed up my enjoyment of the book. There were so many aspects in the series at first that I wished had been part of the book. Like Mad Sweeney, I wish that he was there longer in the book, and he wasn't. And so that just might have been what did that for me. But yeah, this was so good. I really hope that y'all enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
I know my mom. I'm ready to hear my mom's final verdict. Like, did you actually like it? Or did it just entertain you and that was enough and you're going to move on and never come back to anything Neil Gaiman again?
I don't think I like it. It wasn't as emotionally impactful as several of the other things that we've read. But like, again, like we've had great, like just writing throughout all the books we've read so far.
Oh, yeah.
And this one certainly wasn't a letdown. So.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. It was so good.
Well, we appreciate y'all sticking with us for this book. We hope you enjoyed the next one. Our next syllabus is coming out today, so check that out and come along for the ride.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.